Right. Are my slides visible here?
If they are.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, my training in refractive surgery started with Simon Holland and Hugo Sutton in Vancouver. And I've been, one of the things that I've seen, at least some people are not as grateful as they should be to their mentors, and some perhaps a little bit too grateful. Perhaps Kishore, you're a little bit too grateful, but that's okay. I'll take it. So I'm not going to talk for very long on this because I think we've actually touched upon the main points. So hopefully I can just talk a little bit in terms of what are the key elements to training in the developing world, which is more challenging than using the classical model. And I posted, I don't know how the JCRS would be happy for me to just be distributing a PDF, but there it is. I put it on the chat line, this paper on how we what was the history of how this thing came about in Nepal and this leap of faith that we all took. And it includes a lot of details of what I'm going to just quickly run over here if you want to hear it in more in more detail. Obviously, my financial disclosures, which I talked about earlier. So the classical model, right? I mean, that's the developed world model. The classical model is that you bunch into a 1-year fellowship or 2-year fellowship, you bunch the didactic training, observational and practical wet lab training, then some proctorship of cases and observation, and then, of course, you have connection to your mentors, so you can always write back to them and contact them and call them. That's the classical model. For those of you who have been following the newly formed World College of Refractive Surgery and Visual Sciences, established a few months ago, one of the overarching aims of this organization is to improve on the classical model, because the classical model is just not going to produce the number of refractive surgeons that we need to tackle the actual magnitude of the problem. If we were to do it the way I did it, a year and a half training, forget it. It's scraping the surface. We need to find better ways. I'm not going to provide an answer to that, but I'm going to go over the classical model that we used with Kishore, because we were shooting in the dark, and what we did know, as many of you have already mentioned today, we knew that no matter what, this has to be as best as possible, because if we go even one corner, that could be the one that kills the whole project and makes the whole thing, sets the clock back 20 years again. So theoretical didactic training. So one thing that I've contributed to the community, and you don't mind me say, what's the word that you were using, Simon? I don't know that word very well. It's a humble. Yeah, so I'm not particularly humble about this because I did spend almost a year setting up this program online for no pay. And that's because I felt a responsibility that there ought to be formalized, high quality, hyper detailed refractive surgery training, because textbooks are, that I've seen so far just don't have the detail, and fellowships, as I said, are just cumbersome ways. So we set up this theory course through the University of Ulster. They had an online educational platform way before this became the norm, thanks to COVID. But this platform's been there for years. Jorge Alio has set up his own system out of his university in Spain, and Guy Kazarian has set up the Master of Refractive Surgery course, which is spread out over a year with some excellent quality speakers and courses. And Aston here in the UK has set up more of an optometry centered system, but of course hugely important to include optometrists in refractive surgery, as the World College of Refractive Surgery and Visual Sciences has defined from the beginning. Optometrists are part of refractive surgery. So we teach our course twice a year. It's finally going back in person. A 4-day, basically we do 5 days work in 4 days. It's a very, very intense. So it's like a 1-week mini fellowship. again, it's cumbersome. People have to leave their places of work. They have to close their offices. They have to, London's expensive, so it's I don't know. We have a wonderful time, and as Nathan mentioned, I mean, it's a lot of a wealth of information that we feed, and people have to come back 3-4 times to assimilate it. Okay, it's good. You've got a textbook. We put down everything we could possibly think about that would be needed by someone who wants to start refractive surgery into our SMILE textbook. So SMILE is in the middle of it, but there's everything you need to know about PRK and LASIK and diagnostics and pre-op screening and post-op complications. And we put the whole thing into one textbook. Even though it's titled SMILE, because we thought that there needs to be a much better, much more detailed, much more granularized explanation as to how refractive surgery can be done safely and repeatably than what we have out there, which is a lot of text with one chapter on this, one chapter, all written by different people, not cohesive, not really a guide to be able to take this. If you read this book and you memorize it, you will be able to start refractive surgery without one lesson from anyone, because everything is in there. Now, it goes to be saying that it's surgery, so you do have to practically train surgeons, and that we're all used to that, so I don't know we can cut that corner much. But we, in our overshoot and overzealous, we cannot fail mode, we had Kishore and Gopal come from Nepal because we needed the guy who was going to be doing the laser programming, who needed to understand all the technical aspects. We needed 2 people to be trained, and we kept them here for 8 months in London away from their families. So that was a big sacrifice on their part. But, here we were training them with a Hansatome, not knowing that we were going to be able to get a Visumax into Nepal. And that was 8 months, followed by a few months of a break where we finally had to work out the time for myself to take 2 weeks out of my schedule, and then Glenn Karp, my associate, to take 2 weeks out of his schedule so that we could provide Kishore with 4 weeks of supervised surgery. And in between, he did no surgery. In other words, there's no see one, do one, teach one. That's not how refractive surgery is taught. We supervised Kishore on 100 eyes, or at least 100 eyes. I think it was 100 eyes I did 100 eyes and Glenn did 100. He did 200 eyes under direct supervision, so that by the time he was left on his own, he was really well trained, and he therefore had a very solid basis to be operating on his own. And of course, we not only trained Kishore, but we trained his entire staff. We had to go through all of the aspects of practice management. We set up an EMR system. Tim Archer set up our Nextech EMR in Nepal so that we had parallel systems. We had to teach them how to answer the phone, customer service training. We had to show them how to flow the patients through the clinic to get the efficiency and the number of cases, and train the technicians on how to use the pre-op diagnostics. So this was this is a global concept of having to get not just the surgeon, but the systems around him and her in order so that they are hitting the road running without complications in the first place. And this was at the end of our first week there, where we felt, it was just a wonderful feeling to see this. And the first patients ever treated in Nepal, with SMILE, and it was really something. Like I said earlier, high standards are the key in refractive surgery. There's no way. What I say to patients is there aren't 2 ways of flying a 747. There's only just one way. You're not allowed to go, I don't do that thing. I like to cut this thing. I switch that off because it bothers me, the beeping. No, if you want to do a 747 your way, you're not going to have a job, because that's not allowed. And so that is what we need to get into refractive surgery. This is totally different from cataract surgery. Everyone does their own thing. The nucleus, I split it in 3, I split it in 4. No, refractive surgery is engineering. And so the equipment, the methodology, the standardization of the process is paramount to the mass production of something like this, particularly in environments where the follow-up may be somewhat compromised. And so the remote support that we gave Kishore was also a critical component. We were able to log in and look at all of the data on his cases. He would say, I'm not sure if this is keratoconus. We'd log in and say, well, actually, I think it is. Look at the epithelium there. So he had epithelial mapping before the US had epithelial mapping in Kathmandu. All right, so this is what I'm talking about. We made zero compromise in terms of setting him up. And the first thing we did, although we could have published a paper on how did we do it, said, no. If we do that, it's going to get rejected from the journals. Everyone's going to say, no, it can't be done. No, it can't be done. So we published his outcomes first. This was the first paper that came out. And this was his first 2 years of operation, every eye from eye number 1 to eye number 1,396. And we demonstrated that he was able to get the outcomes that were comparable to the outcomes in the FDA trial. In fact, slightly better, because he had better parameter setting and better technology than what the FDA had restricted on the agreement with Zeiss in their first run, because they could only do sphere and whatever. This was including cylinder, so he had cylinder correction as well. And you can see that he had 80% within a half, and this is myopia up to -10. 60% of the eyes, 2016, myopia up to -10. Okay, and absolute safety. No eyes of this group, including his first eyes in his learning curve, no eyes lost 2 lines of best spectacle corrected vision. It was really a testament to standardization, because yes, Kishore is a great surgeon and he'd already done 10,000 cataracts before he came to me, but okay, you got to start with good ingredients if you want the meal to taste well, but you do also have to know how to cook. And actually, ironically, this was the largest SMILE study published to date when it came out. So not only did we surpass all of the studies that had ever been published before, and there have been millions of SMILE procedures already performed by the time Kishore got in there, but we managed to do the quality control, if you like, with in the public eye, with a peer-reviewed system, so that there was credibility established from the get-go. And it was then that we decided to publish the method paper, which I have to add was rejected from 2 journals before it was accepted for publication, because there were a lot of motivated competitors who were jealous and were trying to block this kind of concept. And as Simon said earlier, we have to be collegiate about refractive surgery. And as Osama said earlier, absolutely, we want to train our competitors because we want them to be as good as us so that they don't mess up the confidence in refractive surgery. So the message I want to leave you with is you've got to start with the right ingredients. And in our case, we were very fortunate to have started with an extraordinary ingredient called a Kishore. And yes, we published the first papers after this because of his extraordinary capabilities. We published the very first SMILE papers with hyperopia. It was 3 papers that came out of the work that we did with him in SMILE. Then the multi-center trial in Europe came 4 years after this. So we're way ahead of the curve in being able to capitalize on the environment and the expertise of a surgeon there. And then Kishore himself goes and says, wait a minute, I've got an idea. I think I know how to do a sutureless corneal transplant for keratoconus. And he sends me these drawings, and not these, because these were in the publication, but he sent me this hand drawing. I'm like, wow, that actually could work. And we don't even have to ask Zeiss for help, because we're going to use the SMILE program and the FLAP program, and we're going to use a cut down thing. And we can use all these different licenses to create this button and then create the hole. And you're going to shove that extra tissue in through that 2mm incision, which he did. And this is the pre-op astigmatism, 12.46 diopters of astigmatism. And this is 1 year later, 5.4 diopters of astigmatism. And look at that cornea, the big fat transplant in the middle. 2 weeks post-op, crystal clear. I mean, yeah, that's what I mean by superstar, right? The guy is off on his own, is creating science and innovation by himself. We helped a little bit with publishing this and stuff. But so We trained the second surgeon when Kishore left and formed a new organization. And there he is, Shash. And then the third surgeon who, because of COVID, hasn't actually been able to come to London to us yet, but she's attended our course online 3 times already. And, as Nathan explained, I was delighted to go back to my birthplace. I was born in Lima, Peru. I took my sons to Cusco. They worked at the orphanage for a week, which was a life experience for them. And Nathan and Christian were unbelievable hosts to them and me. And we spent a week. We just had a ball. We went through their first cases and did a proctorship program. And incredibly, look at the way they're setting up. They set up exactly the way we're set up in London. The standardization was inspiring, awe-inspiring, and training their nurses on where the instruments go, in what order, what angle to hand them to the surgeon, and so they don't have to look up from the microscope. All of the details of training we managed to do in that 1 week. And we're now, delighted that Daniel is from Addis Ababa. He is now taking the Ulster course, and he is going to go to Osama in June, and he'll come to us in the summer. And we're going to hopefully start this whole new concept again through Cure Blindness, through Jeff's organization in September or so in Ethiopia. So the classical model, wonderful, it works great, but sadly, we're going to have to do something better than this. And that's the open question. I don't have the answers. We need to accelerate this training process without compromising the quality of care. That's the challenge to global refractive surgery, is how to produce superb refractive surgery. How do we produce 747 pilots in a 3-month course? Not a year and a half and then 3 years of practicing and fluff and all the stuff that we've had to do up till now. So thank you for that opportunity to sort of give you no answers and just questions.
Dr. Reinstein.